$4.8 million house and a $38,000 bill. Why push her to sign? What's hidden?
My parents gave my sister a $4.8 million house and handed me a $38,000 bill. Let that sit for a second. Because it didn't happen in private. It didn't happen quietly. It happened in front of everyone. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Crystal glasses, designer dresses, soft jazz drifting through a room that smelled like money and expensive flowers. The kind of wedding reception people post about for months. The kind where everything is curated to look perfect. And then there was me, Lena Carter, 27, standing right in the middle of it, holding an envelope that felt heavier than it should have. Have you ever had a moment where something felt wrong before you even knew why? That was this. The sun was setting behind the glass walls of the Malibu resort, casting everything in gold. My sister, Vanessa, stood beside her new husband, glowing, flawless, exactly where she was always meant to be, center stage. She was 31, confident, admired, and very used to being chosen. I wasn't. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC called out, his voice smooth and practiced. The parents of the bride have a very special surprise. Applause rose instantly. Of course it did. In our family, surprises were never small. My parents stood up together, Richard and Diane Carter. Perfect posture, perfect smiles. They looked like the kind of people who had never made a mistake in their lives. The kind of people who times decided, times how things would go, and expected the world to follow. My dad held 2 envelopes. That should have been the first warning, but I didn't think much of it. Not yet. Vanessa, my mom said, her voice warm and glowing with pride, your father and I wanted to give you something to start your new life. Vanessa laughed softly, already emotional. Mom, you've done enough. No, my dad interrupted gently. This is different. He handed her the first envelope. She opened it slowly, carefully, like she already knew it would be big, and then she froze. Not confused, not shocked, overwhelmed. Oh my God, she whispered. What is it? Someone called out. My dad turned to the crowd, smiling wider now. A home, he announced, in Bel Air, fully paid. The room erupted. Gasps. Applause. Someone actually cheered. Phones came out, immediately recording, capturing, preserving the moment. Vanessa covered her mouth, tears forming as she threw her arms around them. A $4.8 million house. Just like that. And for a brief second, just a second, I felt something twist in my chest. Not jealousy exactly. Something sharper. Something older. Because this wasn't new. This was how it had always been. Vanessa received, I adjusted. Then my mom turned. Slowly toward me. And that's when the room shifted. It was subtle, but you could feel it. Like the air had changed direction. Lena, she said, her smile still there, but thinner now, tighter. She stepped forward and handed me the second envelope. No applause this time. No music swelling. Just quiet curiosity. I remember the weight of it in my hands, the texture of the paper, the way my fingers hesitated for half a second before opening it. And here's the thing. A part of me already knew this wasn't going to be good, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a single document, clean, typed, precise. At the top, invoice statement, my name, my full name, and underneath it, numbers. Line after line after line. Educational assistant, living expenses, emergency support, miscellaneous disbursements. My stomach dropped as my eyes scanned down to the total. 38,214美元67美分. I blinked. Once, twice, no mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a bill, a real one, with a payment deadline. And at the bottom, A line waiting for my signature. "Mom?" I said quietly. She leaned in just enough so only I could hear her next words. "We've supported you long enough." Then louder for everyone else. "It's time you take responsibility." You could feel the shift ripple through the crowd. The whispers started immediately. "Is that real?" "Wait, what?" "Why would they?" My dad stepped closer, his voice calm, controlled. "Just sign it, Lena." Like this was normal. Like this wasn't happening in front of 100 people. Like I was the one making it uncomfortable. Have you ever been put on the spot so hard that your body just pauses? That was me. Frozen, holding a bill I didn't understand, in a moment I definitely didn't agree to. And then my mom added, "Just loud enough. Pay it or leave." A few people actually went silent because now it wasn't just awkward. It was a spectacle. I could feel eyes on me from every direction. Judgment, curiosity, some pity, some satisfaction. I looked down at the paper again, at the signature line, at the pen my dad had already placed in my hand. Something about this felt planned, too clean, too prepared, and that's when I noticed him standing near the back of the room, a man I didn't recognize. Mid 40S. Dark suit, completely still, not whispering, not reacting, just watching me. Our eyes met for half a second, and then he started walking forward. "Don't sign that." The words cut through the room like glass. Everything stopped. Every conversation, every movement, even my breathing. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a family moment anymore. It was something else entirely. And I had no idea what I was standing in the middle of. "Don't sign that." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried anyway. The kind of calm authority that doesn't ask for attention, it takes it. Every head in the room turned at once. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the music seemed to fade into the background as if the entire space had decided, collectively, to listen. The man I'd noticed moments earlier was now halfway across the reception floor, moving with deliberate, unhurried steps. Not nervous, not rushed, certain. And that was the first thing that didn't make sense. Because everyone else, they were reacting. He wasn't... "Excuse me?" my father said sharply, stepping forward, his tone slicing through the tension. "This is a private family matter." The man didn't even look at him at first. His eyes stayed on me. "Lena Carter?" he asked. Something about the way he said my name made my grip tighten around the paper. "Yes." He gave a small nod like that, confirmed something important. Then finally, he turned to my parents. "My name is Daniel Reeves," he said evenly, "and I strongly advise that she does not sign that document." A ripple went through the crowd, quiet but electric. Advice? Who was this guy? My mom's expression shifted instantly. That polished smile? Gone. Replaced with something colder. "You're not part of this," she said, her voice low but edged. "You need to leave." Daniel didn't move, didn't even blink. "That depends," he replied calmly, "on whether you want this handled here or later." That landed hard. You could feel it. My dad stepped closer now, positioning himself slightly in front of my mom, like he was trying to physically block whatever was happening. "There's nothing to handle," he said. "That's a legitimate financial document." Legitimate. That word echoed in my head. Because suddenly, I wasn't just embarrassed anymore. I was alert, watching, listening. Because for the first time since this started, something didn't feel one-sided. Daniel finally turned back to me. And this time, there was no distance in his voice. "Did you authorize these charges?" he asked. Simple question, but it hit like a spotlight. I looked down at the paper again. The itemized list, the numbers, the neat, almost clinical way it had been put together. Had I authorized them? No. Not like this. I I hesitated, my voice quieter now. I knew they helped me sometimes, but not like this. Not as a debt. Not as something I'd be handed like a bill at my sister's wedding. Daniel nodded slowly, like he expected that answer. Then he did something that made the tension snap even tighter. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, different from the ones my parents had used. Thicker, official, important. Then this becomes relevant, he said. My mom took a step forward immediately. You don't have the right. I do, Daniel interrupted, still calm, still controlled, because this was left under very specific instructions. That word left hung in the air, and suddenly something clicked in the back of my mind. A memory, faint, distant, but there. Instructions from who? I asked before I could stop myself. Daniel looked at me, really looked at me this time, and for the first time there was something almost deliberate in his expression, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. For you, he said, from someone who anticipated this might happen. A murmur spread through the guests again. Anticipated? What did that even mean? My dad laughed suddenly, but it sounded forced. This is ridiculous, he said. You're interrupting a wedding with some vague story. It's not vague, Daniel said. And just like that, the room went quiet again. Because his tone changed, not louder, but sharper, precise. It's documented. That word landed heavier than anything else so far. Documented. Proof. Reality. I felt my heartbeat pick up, not from panic this time, but from something else. Something building, because this wasn't random anymore. This wasn't just humiliation. This was something planned, something layered, something I hadn't seen yet. Daniel stepped closer to me and held out the envelope, not opening it, not yet, just offering it. This was meant to be opened if you were ever pressured into acknowledging a debt you didn't agree to, he said. My fingers tightened around the bill in my other hand. Pressured? That word felt a little too accurate, too precise. I looked at my parents, really looked this time. And for the first time that night, they didn't look confident. They looked tense, careful, like something had just gone off script. I swallowed. What's in it? I asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the paper in my hand, then back at me, and said, If you sign that, you may never get the chance to find out. The room held its breath again. And, just like that, this wasn't about a bill anymore. It was about something much bigger. Something buried. Something someone had gone out of their way to protect. And I was standing right at the center of it, holding two pieces of paper, one demanding payment, the other promising answers, and I hadn't even opened it yet. Everyone thought I was the problem, but no one ever questioned the system I was in. Let me ask you something. What if the story you've been told about yourself your entire life wasn't actually yours? Because standing there in the middle of that reception, holding a bill I never agreed to and an envelope I didn't understand, something started to shift, not around me, inside me, because this didn't feel new. It felt familiar, just louder, more public, more intentional. And suddenly, all those little moments from the past, the ones I brushed off, ignored, or explained away, started lining up in a way they never had before. I grew up in a house where everything looked perfect from the outside. Big home, private schools, vacations that looked like magazine covers. But inside, there were rules, unspoken ones. Vanessa followed them effortlessly. I didn't. She was the one my parents introduced with pride. Top of her class, law school, corporate job, engaged by 29. Everything made sense with her. Everything aligned. Me, I was different. Not reckless, not irresponsible, just independent. I chose freelance work over a corporate path. I moved out early. I stopped asking for help because every time I did, it came with something attached, something subtle but always there. A reminder, atone, a look, you owe us. They never said it like that. Not directly, but it was always implied. And now it was printed, itemized, totaled down to the cent. I looked down again at the paper in my hand. 38,214美元67美分. Do you know what bothered me the most? It wasn't the number. It was how clean it was, how organized. Like this had been tracked, maintained, prepared over time, not in anger, not in a moment, but slowly, quietly, and that's when a memory surfaced sharp this time. I was 22. Sitting at the kitchen table, my dad had slid a document across to me. Casual, almost dismissive. Just sign this, he said. I remember glancing at it. Some kind of family contribution record. That's what he called it. I didn't fully understand it, but something about it felt off. What is this for? I asked. Just internal tracking, he said. Nothing serious. I didn't sign it. We argued. It wasn't explosive, but it lingered. And after that, things changed. They didn't stop helping me completely, but every bit of support became quieter, less visible, less acknowledged, until eventually I stopped accepting it altogether. Not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't trust it. And now, standing here, it felt like that moment had followed me all the way to this one. Only this time, it wasn't private. It was a performance. I looked up. The room hadn't relaxed. If anything, it was tighter now, focused. People weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting to see what I'd do, waiting to decide who I was in this story. The ungrateful daughter, or something else? Vanessa finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. Lena, what is he talking about? I looked at her, and for a second, just a second, I couldn't tell if she genuinely didn't know or if she had just never needed to ask. I don't know, I said honestly, but I wanted to, more than anything, I wanted to understand what I was standing in the middle of. Daniel stepped slightly closer, not invading space, just enough to ground the moment. They've framed this as a debt, he said, his voice steady, but the context matters. My dad exhaled sharply. There is no context. She received support. This is documentation. Documentation can be structured in many ways, Daniel replied. Not all of them neutral. That landed. Because now, this wasn't just emotional anymore. It was strategic, intentional, constructed. I tightened my grip on the envelope he had given me. Still sealed. Still unanswered. Who sent this? I asked again, more firmly this time. Daniel met my gaze. And this time, he didn't delay. Your grandmother, he said. The words hit differently than I expected, because I barely knew her. Margaret Carter, my dad's mother. Quiet, observant, always watching more than she spoke. We weren't close, but there was one moment, just one, that suddenly felt important. A conversation at a family dinner. She had pulled me aside, not dramatically, not urgently, just quietly. You should be careful what you sign, she told me. At the time, I thought it was random. Now, it didn't feel random at all. Back in the present, my mom's voice cut in sharper now. This is inappropriate, she said. You're dragging up irrelevant history. It's not irrelevant, Daniel said. And then he lifted the envelope slightly, not opening it yet, just enough for everyone to see. It's contingency. The word hung in the air, heavy, precise, planned. I felt something shift again, deeper this time, because contingency means one thing. Someone expected this to happen. not hoped, not guessed, expected. I looked at the bill in my hand, then at the envelope, then at my parents. And for the first time, I didn't feel cornered. I felt positioned, like I was standing at a decision point, one that mattered more than anything that had happened so far. Daniel's voice dropped slightly, not softer, just more direct. This was meant to be opened if they ever tried to make you acknowledge something that wasn't what it appeared to be. A pause. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. And based on what I'm seeing, this qualifies. The room went still again, because now this wasn't just tension. This was exposure. And whatever was inside that envelope, it wasn't small. And I still hadn't opened it. The bill wasn't the trap. Signing it was. Think about that for a second. Because anyone can hand you a number. Anyone can demand money. But a signature changes everything. And standing there with 100 eyes on me and a pen still in my hand, I started to realize this wasn't about collecting $38,000. This was about making it official. Lena, my dad said again, his tone tighter now, controlled but cracking at the edges. This has gone on long enough. Gone on? I almost laughed. Nothing had even started yet. Daniel didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge the pressure. He was watching me carefully, like this entire situation hinged on one thing, which it did. What happens if she signs it? Daniel asked suddenly, directing the question straight at my parents. A simple question, but it hit like a test. My mom answered first, too quickly. It formalizes the repayment agreement, she said. That's all? That's not all, Daniel replied calmly. A pause, and then he took a small step forward. Signing this document doesn't just acknowledge a debt, he continued. It legally validates every line item listed here, regardless of how those charges were created. A murmur spread instantly, because now this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was legal, precise, dangerous. I looked down at the paper again. Every charge, every number, every vague description. If I signed this, I wasn't just agreeing to pay. I was agreeing that it was real. Even if it had been built, adjusted, or manipulated over time. My stomach tightened, and more importantly, Daniel added, his voice cutting clean through the noise, it waives her right to dispute any prior financial structuring tied to these entries. That word waives landed hard, because suddenly this wasn't just about the past, it was about the future. What I'd lose. What are you talking about? Vanessa said, stepping forward now, her brows furrowed, her voice sharper than before. What structuring? For the first time, she didn't look confident. She looked uncertain. Daniel glanced at her briefly, then back at me. There are assets, he said carefully. Assets that were meant to be allocated under specific conditions. My dad's jaw tightened. This is not the place. It became the place when you handed her that document publicly, Daniel said. And just like that, control slipped a little further. You could feel it. The room had changed sides, not fully, not openly, but the energy was different now. Curiosity had replaced judgment. Suspicion had replaced assumption. I swallowed, my pulse steady but loud in my ears. What assets? I asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the envelope in my hand, still sealed, still waiting. Your grandmother anticipated a scenario where financial pressure might be used to force a decision, he said. There it was again. Anticipated, not guessed, not feared, planned for. She created a safeguard, he continued, one that activates under very specific conditions. My mom let out a short, disbelieving laugh. This is absurd. Is it? Daniel asked. And then He reached out, not to take the envelope, but to tap it lightly, because this, he said, contains the trigger. The word sent a ripple through the room. Trigger, not explanation, not letter. Trigger. I felt it then. That shift, that realization, this envelope wasn't just information. It was action. What happens if I open it? I asked quietly. Daniel met my gaze, and this time there was no hesitation. It depends, he said, on whether you've already signed that. I looked down at the paper again. The signature line, still empty. The pen still in my hand, and suddenly it felt heavier than the bill itself, because now the decision wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Two paths: sign and close something permanently, or wait and uncover something that had been deliberately hidden. Vanessa shook her head slightly, looking between our parents and Daniel. Why wouldn't you just tell us what's in it? She asked. Daniel's answer was immediate, because it was never meant for everyone. Silence. Heavy, thick, intentional. This wasn't a family discussion anymore. This was something designed specifically for me. My dad stepped forward again, his voice lower now, more urgent. Lena, enough. Sign it. Not a request. A command. And that's when it hit me. Not fear, not pressure, but clarity. If this was truly nothing, why were they pushing so hard? Why now? Why like this? I slowly lowered the pen, just slightly, not dropping it, not committing, just pausing. And in that tiny movement, everything shifted. Daniel saw it and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Good, he said quietly. Then, finally, he gestured toward the envelope. Because if you sign that, he added, his voice steady, unmistakable, you lose everything she protected for you, including the truth about how that bill was created. The room froze. Every whisper died. Every movement stopped. Because now, this wasn't about money anymore. It was about what had been done and what was about to be exposed. And I was one decision away from finding out. The house wasn't the biggest thing they gave away that night. It was the truth they almost lost. I didn't drop the pen. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped. And sometimes that's louder than anything else. The tiny shift in my hand, the decision not to sign, sent something through the room like a shockwave. You could feel it in the silence, in the way people leaned forward without realizing it, in the way my parents' expressions changed, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to notice. Enough to confirm something wasn't right. I'm not signing it, I said. Calm, clear, final. It wasn't loud, but it carried, and just like that, the balance tipped. My dad exhaled sharply, the composure he'd been holding on to starting to crack. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe. But for the first time all night, it didn't feel like mine. Daniel gave a small nod beside me. Not triumphant, not relieved, just ready. Then we proceed, he said. Proceed. Like this had always been the next step. Like we had just crossed an invisible line. He turned slightly, angling his body so both I and the room could see what he was about to do. Then, slowly, he opened the envelope. No rush, no theatrics, just a clean tear across the seal. And somehow, that sound cut deeper than anything else that had happened so far. Paper slid out. Not one sheet. Several, thicker stock, official formatting. Tabs, signatures. This wasn't a note. This was a file. A record. A plan. You should all understand, Daniel began, his voice steady, measured, that what you're about to hear was prepared over 2 years ago. 2 years. Before this wedding. Before this moment. Before the bill. By Margaret Carter, he continued, In response to financial discrepancies she identified within family-controlled accounts. Discrepancies. That word landed differently now. Because it wasn't emotional. It was clinical, verifiable, documented. My mom crossed her arms, her posture tightening. This is speculation. It's accounting, Daniel corrected. And then he started laying it out, piece by piece. Over the course of several years, he said, flipping to the first document, funds allocated for Lena Carter were reclassified internally as recoverable expenses. My breath caught slightly. Reclassified. Not spent, not gifted. Rewritten. Educational costs. Housing support. Living assistance, originally designated as non-repayable distributions, were gradually converted into a ledger of debt. The exact categories listed on the bill, word for word. I felt it then, that deep, quiet click of something falling into place. This wasn't random. It was built carefully, over time. My dad shook his head, stepping forward. That's a misinterpretation. It's documented across multiple internal records, Daniel said, lifting another page, including versions signed and reviewed by both of you. Silence. Not the soft kind. The heavy kind. The kind that presses down. Vanessa spoke again, but this time her voice wasn't steady. Wait, she said. You're saying this was planned? No one answered her immediately. Which was an answer. Daniel turned one more page. This document, he said, holding it slightly higher, is a notarized statement from Margaret Carter. My chest tightened, because suddenly, this wasn't just about money. This was about intent. Within it, he continued, she outlines her belief that these financial restructurings were being used to create leverage. Leverage, the word echoed. Cold. Precise. She further states, Daniel added, that in the event Lena Carter is pressured into acknowledging this constructed debt, he paused, just long enough for the room to lean in, for every breath to hold. A protected trust established in her name is to be immediately activated. A ripple moved through the crowd. Confusion, shock, realization. I felt my pulse spike, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Because there was still one piece missing, the one that mattered most. Daniel lowered the paper slightly, and for the first time, there was the faintest shift in his tone, not emotion. But wait, this trust, he said, includes assets, holdings, and property shares, totaling just over $5.2 million. The number didn't explode through the room. It sank, slow, heavy, irreversible. My grip tightened slightly at my sides, because suddenly, the house Vanessa received earlier, it wasn't the headline anymore. It was context. And I hadn't even asked the question yet. The one everyone was thinking, the one hanging right there in the air. I looked at Daniel, finally, fully, and asked, transferred how? Cut. Transferred how? That question didn't just hang in the air. It anchored it. Because everything up until this moment, it was tension, suspicion, possibility. This was the answer. Daniel didn't rush, didn't dramatize it. He simply adjusted the document in his hand and looked directly at me. Immediately, he said. One word. Clean. Final. But then he continued, the trust is structured to activate upon a specific trigger your refusal to acknowledge fraudulent or misrepresented debt tied to internal family accounts. Fraudule. There it was. Out in the open now. Not implied. Not hinted. Named. A sharp inhale moved through the room, quiet but collective. By declining to sign, Daniel went on, you've met that condition. As of this moment, the trust is active, fully protected, and legally separated from any external claims, including those made by your parents. My parents, I looked at them, really looked this time. No performance left, no polish. My dad's jaw was tight, his posture rigid, not authoritative anymore, but defensive. My mom? Still. Too still. Like she was calculating, looking for a way out that wasn't there. And suddenly, everything made sense. The bill, the timing, the public pressure. It wasn't about the money. It was about forcing my signature before this could happen. Because if I had signed that document, I would have confirmed the debt, waived my rights, and effectively disqualified myself from this trust. Clean, legal, irreversible. A perfect trap built slowly, executed publicly, and almost successful. Almost. Vanessa's voice broke through, quieter, now uncertain, in a way I had never heard before. The house, she said, looking between our parents and Daniel. Where did that money come from? No one answered immediately, but Daniel didn't look away. The Bel Air property, he said carefully, was purchased using a combination of Carter family funds, including distributions originally intended to be divided. Divided between us? The implication settled in slowly, but when it did, it changed everything. That house? It wasn't just a gift. It was part of something that had been shifted, reallocated, redirected. Vanessa took a small step back, like the ground under her had just changed. You said this was a gift, she whispered, looking at our parents now. My dad didn't respond, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. And that silence, it spoke louder than anything else tonight. Daniel continued, steady as ever. Margaret Carter became aware of these reallocations approximately 2 years before her passing. This trust was her corrective measure. Corrective, not emotional, not reactive. Strategic, planned, documented. I exhaled slowly, not in relief, not yet, but in understanding. Because the picture was finally complete. Every piece, every decision, every moment that didn't make sense before, it did now. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't behind the story. I was ahead of it. I'm not signing anything, I said again, not louder, but stronger. And this time, there was no hesitation in the room, no confusion, just acceptance. Because the narrative had flipped completely. Daniel nodded once. Understood, he said. Then he turned slightly, addressing not just me, but everyone. As of now, all assets within the trust are secured. Any attempt to enforce the presented debt will initiate a formal review of the financial records involved. Formal review, legal language. But everyone knew what it meant. Investigation, exposure, consequences, real ones. And just like that, the spotlight shifted. Not on me anymore. On them. Whispers started again, but different this time. Lower, sharper. Is this fraud? Did they really? This is being recorded. My parents had built their entire image on control, on perception, on being untouchable. And in a matter of minutes, that image cracked. Not loudly, but permanently. Vanessa didn't say anything else. She just stood there, processing, recalibrating, quietly stepping away from them. Not dramatically, but deliberately. That distance, it mattered. Because this didn't just break something legally. It broke something personally. The fallout didn't explode overnight. It unfolded, carefully, publicly, legally. An internal financial review was initiated within days. Records were pulled, accounts examined, and the deeper they went, the clearer it became. Funds had been restructured, reclassified, not illegally in obvious ways, but in methods that blurred lines. Enough to raise serious questions. Enough to trigger legal scrutiny. My parents didn't face immediate charges. But their reputation, that shifted fast. Business relationships cooled. Social circles grew quieter, careful, because association suddenly carried risk. Vanessa moved out of the Bel Air house within 2 weeks. Not forced, not publicly. But the ownership was under review and she didn't want to be in the middle of it. We didn't talk much after, not at first, but when we did, it wasn't hostile. It was different, more honest, because for the first time, we were both seeing the same reality, not the version we were raised in, the real one. As for me, I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat, because this was never about winning. It was about not losing something I didn't even know I had. The trust was real, fully active, and for the first time in my life, everything tied to it was mine. No condición, no hidden ledgers, no quiet expectations, just mine. Weeks later, I visited one of the properties included in it. Not the biggest, not the most expensive, but the quietest. A small, modern house tucked just outside the city, glass windows, open space, silence, real silence. Not the kind filled with tension, the kind that lets you think. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. No audience, no expectations, no one watching to see what I'd do next. And that's when it hit me. Not the money, not the legal victory, but the shift. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to something. I was choosing. I walked further in, setting my keys down on the counter. The space echoed slightly. Empty, but not in a bad way. In a beginning kind of way. That night at the wedding, they handed me a bill, tried to define my past, control my future, wrap everything into a number and call it truth. But the truth wasn't in that paper. It was in what they didn't expect, what they couldn't control, what someone else saw coming long before I did. And in the end, they didn't just lose the leverage they built, they lost the version of the story they'd been telling for years. I didn't walk out of that reception defeated. I walked out informed. And that changed everything. They asked me to pay for a life they controlled, but the truth was already paid for.
So, was it protection or control? How many years were they planning this?